good day if you're like, it's already afternoon for you, and hope you had a good night. I would like to, before we move on with the program, I would like to take a quick look back on day one of the conference. And what are your impressions? What are your takeaways from day one? What are some of the things that you still have in mind of yesterday's conference day? Please share them with us in the chat. You can all type in something, just a few keywords about your takeaways of yesterday's conference day. And while you're doing that, I would like to invite someone here who some of you may have seen already yesterday. Birgit Jansen is her name, and she is doing the graphic recording of this conference in the background. And Birgit, are you there? Check if I can see if she's there. Birgit, are you joining us? Are you there? Birgit is there. Birgit, would you like to switch on your camera so we can see you?
Hello, good morning, everyone.
There you are. Good morning, Birgit. How are you doing?
I'm fine. I slept well and happy to hear more interesting things today.
Great that you're joining us. You're joining us from Cologne, from home, I believe, or from the office?
No, that's my studio, actually.
Oh, that's
the kids, so I went to a quiet space.
Okay, that's great. Birgit, shall we have a look at what you were documenting of yesterday? Like, would you like to show us your picture of the day one?
Of course. You just have to help me. I just uploaded it. So
yes.
Can you
Content library?
Yes. I uploaded it in the content library, and in order to show it, what do I do?
You have to click on the file.
Okay. Can you let me know? Okay.
Nothing yet coming up.
You're a little lost in technique.
Double click on the file, please. Did you see it?
I uploaded it, but it doesn't show on the left side. So that's what happens. Okay. Actually, we'll do it the old-fashioned way.
Okay.
We'll do it the very old-fashioned way.
That's very nice. Okay, now we can see it on your iPad. So there we have Water Security and Climate Change Conference, and I see the face of Stefan Uhlenbrock there on the right side coming up. And if you go a bit closer with that part of the session, then we can see what you documented about his keynote, and then we move on to the roundtable. We see the three waves still from Stefan Uhlenbrock's presentation, and all the other things that all of you in the audience can have a look at later, because all of that will be on the platform, so you can retrieve it. And there you have the roundtable discussion on co-design. So as you look at this beautiful picture that Birgit was drawing yesterday, very nice, also, Birgit. Thank you very much. And on the not to forget.
One hint for the speakers or for the session chairs. If you want to be on the picture with your key messages, please send them to me via email. You should have gotten an email concerning this.
Great. So we encourage the session chairs to bring the information to you so they can be also documented and they can be in the picture. Thank you for that, Birgit. And we see some people coming in. Let's have a look at the chat. There's people from Greece. There's a person from Zambia. There's very nice graphic design. Looks awesome. You got a compliment there, I guess, Birgit. Greetings from Egypt and India. I also find these lovely pictures on our social media. Laura is giving us a hint to tune in to Twitter, Instagram, and all the other things. Good morning from Pakistan. Good morning hello from Mongolia. My goodness, we are really global. Look at this. Nepal is there. And Laura is telling us you can find the pictures also on our webpage. That's perfect. Great. Birgit, thank you so much for showing us these the pictures as a little teaser. And this picture will be developing, right?
Yes, it will grow within the 4 days and can be shared every day, every morning. And you will have some surprises of seeing how it develops.
Perfect. Thank you so much for the moment, Birgit. we'll see each other again tomorrow, I guess, tomorrow morning and maybe sometime in between.
That's true. Enjoy your day. Bye-bye.
Thank you very much. See you later. Very nice design. There's again some comments coming in. There's other people joining from the Netherlands, and you can read it yourself. People from Hanoi. So a warm welcome to all of you. It's great to have you all back, and some new participants joining. And with this, and without further ado, I would like to already move to our first program item, which is the keynote. The keynote by Zita Sebesvari, and she will talk about interconnected vulnerability and risk for water security. Zita, are you there? Maybe you can activate your camera so we can see you, and I see the pictures coming up. Good morning, Zita. How are you?
Good morning. I am doing very well. Looking forward.
Perfect. I see there's sun coming in from the window. What do you see when you look out of the window?
I do see the Rhine River. No flooding at the moment. So in terms of water security, we are okay at the moment.
Okay, perfect. I would like to introduce you just with a couple of words, Zita. So Zita is the head of section on environmental vulnerability and ecosystem services at United Nations University EHS. She's an expert in social-ecological risk assessments, Eco-DRR, so ecosystem-based disaster risk reduction, and EBA. She really likes apparently coastal and low-lying areas because that's where she spends a lot of time. She focuses, for example, on river deltas. And very importantly, I should not miss that, she's a lead author of the IPCC Special Report on the Ocean, the Cryosphere, the part of the world that's actually frozen in a changing climate. That was published in 2019, and I'm sure we will hear something about that later. By training, she's an ecologist and environmental scientist, and she has a master in history. How come, Zita? This is a great mix.
I guess probably I was a little bit undecided in an age of 18, so I started off with history, but then it became apparent that only with history I will not be really happy, so I combined it with ecology, and this is something I still profit from the different disciplines and different perspectives. So at the end of the day, it was a good decision to do it that way.
Okay, perfect. All right. Thank you so much for being here, Zita. And I guess we should just move to your presentation. So if you upload the presentation that we can see it, I will confirm that we can see it, and then we can get started. There it is. It's popping up. For all of you, I hope, if someone can't see it, please write in the chat. But we're good to go. Zita, please, the screens are yours.
Thank you very much, Michael, and thank you also for the invitation to this keynote lecture. I was really looking forward to it, to talk about interconnected risk for water security in the context of climate change. So what I would like to start off, as Michael said, so I was in fact lead author of the SROCCC report of the IPCC. And what this SROCCC report was about is actually a large-scale redistribution of water on our planet from the cryosphere, which is the frozen part of the planet, so the poles and the glaciers, towards the ocean, causing actually problems on both ends in the cryosphere and also at the low-lying coast. I'm showing one of the key figures of the SROCCC report, but of course I will not go into detail in this figure, but just to start off, you see on the top left corner the ocean heat content, which is growing, and depending on the emission pathway we are on, will be smoother or more harsh, but in both cases, the ocean will continue to warm. And this ocean warming has been in the past the main driver of sea level rise due to thermal expansion. But now for the first time, it's actually flipped, so to say. So the main driver is not anymore the thermal expansion, but the melting of ice, the melting of the cryosphere. So mainly the Greenland ice sheet, Antarctica, and also glacier mass loss, which contributes to sea level rise. The extent of sea level rise we will face very much depends on the emission scenario we are following. Here depicted for so to say a scenario which you see in blue, which is following more or less the Paris Agreement, and a scenario in red, which is a high emissions scenario, leading by 2300 to very different futures at the low-lying coast. But you also see that even if we take the low emission scenario, there will be some sea level rise we have to prepare for. This has to do with this huge water body of the ocean. That means how we are saying we already committed to a certain level of sea level rise, which is unavoidable, and we have to prepare for it. We have to adapt at the coast. So by the end of the century, we are looking at futures with around 40 centimeter global mean sea level rise, or around 80 centimeter, depending on the emission scenarios. Going forward, just to zoom in a little bit, what is happening in the high mountains where the glaciers are melting. We are expecting a lot of unstable slopes and landslides as a consequence. We will see at the beginning more snow avalanches, and then later on when more snow and ice is lost, then less, as we do now. And of course, there are also changes in the flood pattern. And the next slide will show a bit of more details about the development of flood in the high mountains. So if you focus first on the lower panel, you see first the situation. You see this greenish, which depict the glaciers, which are melting and causing, as you see in the middle picture, more discharge in the rivers, more flooding. But at the end, so to say, the glaciers will be melted away, and we are rather facing a drought situation. In the upper panel, you see that there is a time, the so-called peak water time, when a lot of glacier water is actually melting and leading to flooding. But this will be followed by a drought period when the glaciers are melted away, and where there be water insecurity in those high mountains areas. In some parts of the world, this is already happening. Here's an example from February this year from India, where we had a flash flood event. There were discussions about the driver of this event. So some said it's a glacier lake outburst flood, where the one part of the glacier was broken away and led to a dam breakage and to the flood event. But other observations are showing that part of a slope, a big rock was falling apart and falling into the lake, so to say, causing this strong flood event. It is still looked at because it's a very fresh event. It just happened less than 1 month ago. But either way, climate change has contributed to the event, and these types of event we are expecting to see more in the future. On the other hand, once glaciers are retreating, melting away in the high mountain areas, people are facing water shortages. We are seeing also some innovative solutions, like here the so-called ice stupas in Ladakh in India. This is, so to say, artificial glacier where in the autumn, in the winter time, water is taken from the higher mountains and artificially built up to this beautiful. I think the presentation is lost. Do you still see the presentation, Michael?
not see the presentation right now.
Oh,
Can you just click on Content Library again?
Yes.
Here we go. We see it again.
Okay, I don't know what happened. I didn't click anything.
That's no problem. We can see it again. No problem.
Okay, so we are back to the wonderful ice stupas in Ladakh in India, which actually helps people to overcome the dry period in the spring when this retreated glacier is not yet melting, because now the glaciers are too high latitude and not melting in the early spring anymore. So this is something which was invented in 2013, so it's quite new, and now spreading in the region as a local and low-cost solution to actually have irrigation options in the spring, as long as glacier meltwater is not yet available. This is an overview slide which is showing this large-scale placement of water. If you follow the blue lines, so from the cryosphere in the mountains and the cryosphere from the poles towards the oceans, causing the sea level rise we already discussed. And then a lot of cascading impacts on the low-lying coast. So we are talking about sea level hazards, which relates to local mean sea level rise, which might be different than the global mean sea level rise due to many local drivers which contribute to local sea level rise. This could be, for example, related to land sinking and also to compaction and other processes which can lead to very different local sea level rise than on the global scale. But also local extremes contribute. With local extremes, I'm talking about high tides, storm surges, cyclones, which play out very differently with sea level rise. These sea level hazards cause on the coast, different kind of more local coastal hazards, such as submergence of land, enhanced flooding, erosion, salinization of soils and water resources, loss and change of marine and coastal ecosystems, and also impeded drainage, leading to a number of direct and indirect impacts, such as land use changes, land salinization, impacts on people's livelihoods, impacts on the built environment, or other human activities such as agriculture. What we are seeing that the different stressors, however, compound. So if we are talking, for example, about the low-lying coast, we are not only talking about sea level rise, salinization, coastal flooding, but there might be an epidemic outbreak, chemical accidents, water reservoir depletion, like upstream, which leading to low flows in the rivers, and with that also the opportunity for the seawater to intrude much more far inland than otherwise it would have been a case. So altogether we have a compounding situations on the stressor side. And at the same time, we do have also compounding situations on the vulnerability side. So if you think about those, for example, coastal or also high mountain population, so how this water related hazards play out has to do a lot with age distribution, gender, income groups, but also disabilities or access to social protection schemes and other safety nets. So what we see that these stressors as well as the vulnerabilities increasingly compound, causing a quite complex situation, which is interlinked with other hazards happening possibly very far away somewhere else on the planet. A few examples for this compounding situations. Cyclone Amphan in May 2020 hit the West Bengal region and caused a lot of saltwater flooding, erosion of the coastline, but also breaching of embankments. And this happened in a situation where COVID-19 already impacted the population very heavily. So you see here on the left-hand side a boat bringing relief, and people would need to distance, but there's no possibility to organize it, or very difficult to organize it in a way that distancing is still happening. You see here a woman taking fresh water from a pond, which is actually flooded by seawater. So very likely that this water source gets salinized very soon. And because that happened on a large scale, you see finally here a queue of women, mainly women, trying to distance and to wait for fresh water in this situation. Actually, during Amphan and also in the aftermath, distancing was really difficult to keep, so that those two risks really compounded in the region. This is a conceptual figure showing how the COVID-19 pandemic and Cyclone Amphan caused compounding impacts. I do not go over the figure entirely, but if you just look at the COVID-19 pandemic, so what it's caused, it's really impeded local livelihoods. The marketplaces have been closed. They were strict regulation who can work on the fields and basically stay home situation. So they have been a lot of unemployment. Agricultural and fishing activities were stopped, market restrictions, movement restrictions, and in this very situation then Cyclone Amphan hit and destroyed houses, led to collapsed embankments, flooding, saltwater, lack of freshwater access, and also issues with livelihoods. And these two then cause, so to say, compounding impact, likely change land use on a midterm. It's led to a situation where tourism income collapsed completely, loss of income, increased poverty, reduced food security, and very difficult access to health services due to the compounding risks. Going forward, to address such situations, we do have a lot of options to reduce risk. We can look into the hazard. We can apply different strategies which lead to lower hazards, for example, to reduce coastal erosion, to reduce flooding. Ecosystem-based measures can be applied, or mangroves to alleviate coastal storm energy, or in river basins, water reservoirs could be used to buffer low flows, but also high flows, so to say, flooding situations. But it's also very important to address vulnerabilities, also those compounding ones, which I already mentioned. So to think about social protection, different livelihood diversification options, insurance solutions, but also structural measures such as hazard-proof housing and infrastructure. These are just examples, and of course, depending on the concrete situation, very different solutions might help. Also, the exposure could be reduced, such as through coastal retreat or resettlement if it's really unavoidable, risk-sensitive land use planning, or early warning systems, which are very much applied, for example, also in Bangladesh. Another example is the really devastating flooding events in central Vietnam just in October, November 2020. Many of you will have this picture still in mind because it's just a few months ago. We did have 8 consecutive cyclones and storms in the region. And the attribution of this event to climate change is still ongoing. But it's very likely that in that extent and that severity without climate change, it's difficult to explain. In general, this central Vietnam area is flood prone, strongly flood prone. This consecutive 8 storms and cyclones affected 5 million people. More than 60 died, and a large number of households and livestock was impacted. In general, and I'm referring to review paper we just published 2 weeks ago. Although we see heavy losses in this region, there's still some more need for information on the local drivers, vulnerabilities, and also dynamics of flood risk in the region. The solutions which are applied tend to be structural and often neglecting vulnerabilities, and also the more non-structural measures related to, for example, ecosystem-based solutions, or also social protection systems or insurance systems. We would like to look at more in depth together with our Vietnamese partners from Hue University of Sciences and the respective district and province level authorities to find together more comprehensive solutions for flooding. This is a project which is starting 1st of April. The definition phase just finished. That was for 1.5 years, and we do start with 1st of April to look at the central Vietnam flood events in a more holistic way together. This slide looks a little bit complicated, but what it's conveying, so if you look at the middle, in the middle, it's actually you or I, so each one of us. And the main message of the slide is that no one is an island. So risks are generated on a planetary scale, so to say. The hazards are nowadays less predictable. Exposure is growing globally. Vulnerabilities tend to compound. And to reach risk-informed sustainable development, we really need to work together on different scales, from global to local scale. Governments, NGOs, science, and each of us need to contribute to be able to reduce risk on this in this interconnected world. And with that, I would like to close my presentation, and very much looking forward to your questions.
Thank you very much, Zita, for this great presentation. I was really, following it. Nice images. I mean, nice images, not very nice images in parts, but thank you for giving us really a great picture on the question of interconnectedness. I really liked how you started in the mountains and then came down to the sea also, and gave us a very complete picture from also from the research that you're doing and from conceptual ideas. This last slide was very interesting. No one is an island. Would would you like to tell us a bit more about that? And maybe one comment also, I'm really encouraging the audience also, all of you, to put your questions in the chat, and we'll pick them up, and then I will direct them to Zita. But first, no one is an island. Zita, can you tell us more?
Thank you very much, Michael. I really like this message from the last global assessment report from UNDRR. That's a dedicated agency for disaster risk reduction. And it was their figure, and with this key message, no one is an island. I think this is a really catchy message which sticks with me, and I think also with many others. I was discussing this with students this year, last year, and I think this is a message easy to remember and very important nowadays in our really interconnected world. I think this reminds us that our action has implications on various scales, and sometimes we do not recognize these implications, but probably this global pandemic was also a good reminder how interconnected the world is actually, yes, and how much our decisions, our actions we are taking really has not only compounding but cascading impacts, and that not also locally, yes, but globally. And I think if all of us recognize this more and factor this into our own decision making, then we are not just making our decisions for ourselves, but we are making those decisions for the planet and for our societies.
So it's very much about my personal decisions also that I make in order to reduce risk, perhaps. And well, in these days, we are very aware of that, what that means with the concrete idea or the concrete happening of the pandemic, actually. Okay, thank you for that, Zita. Are there any questions from the audience? Please, just, whatever you have in mind, whatever captured your mind, please put it in the chat, and we can direct questions to Zita directly. I'm curious, Zita, one question I wanted to ask you, that how is it to be a lead author of the IPCC? I mean, what is it that you spend most of the time on? Sending emails to people, or to get papers together, or the document together? What is it that you do most of the time?
Well, I think for the SROCCC report, we were lucky enough to publish it before the pandemics. So basically, we did meet 4 times, and in between, there have been a lot of meetings, virtual meetings, where we discussed different concepts and also assessed together the literature. But of course, it involves a lot of reading and critical assessment of that literature. It involves a lot of joint discussions. So this is the part which I found most enriching. So a lot of exchange with colleagues, with leading experts on their field. And well, it's not a knowledge creation, but an assessment process.
Yes.
So basically,
you bring together information that's already there.
Yes, and you need to critically assess what is there and write down in a way which is helpful for the reader. Yeah. So it provides that boiled down, synthesized knowledge. And so the authors are working for free and on top of their usual duties. So the reward is really the feeling that you contribute to something meaningful, and this will be helpful for decision makers to go on.
Okay, great. We have a first question from Christian Glaser, I guess that's a German name, and I hope I pronounce it correctly. Do you see a trend on a global perspective that social ecological measures against structural are gaining momentum? Big question. Zita, what do you think about that?
They are definitely gaining momentum, and if I am now talking, for example, nature-based solution, ecosystem-based adaptation, ecosystem-based disaster reduction, so a lot happened in the last 10 years. I have been involved in this science and the advocacy behind since 2009, and the change is tremendous. However, if we see the implementation part, we are clearly not yet there. So you see more and more implementation on the ground, but in comparison, it is still small. And this comes out also in the SROCCC report, because if you assess what is there, then it's much slimmer, much thinner still. So in terms of scientific evidence, what you have is still much less than on structural measures. So there's still a lot to be done. But I think the understanding and the momentum is there. We just shouldn't stop here.
Okay, so we are there at like an awareness stage and concepts are there, but implementation is lacking behind. We have a question from Loy Rigo. How do we promote nature-based solutions? A very important topic that's also gaining traction, I think, in the international discussion. What are the most successful approaches? At what scale?
In terms of nature-based, sorry,
nature-based, yes, nature-based solutions, yes.
Well, the scientific evidence differs depending on the approaches, because ecosystem-based or nature-based solutions are very localized and needs to be, their effectivity needs to be proven in the local context. Just to give you a simple example, like mangroves are suited in a very specific coastal setting. If you have a more rocky environment, or an environment which with more wave force, this will be not suitable for mangroves. So you need to look really at the specific situation and then assess the suitability of a certain solution there. And this is where we really still develop the scientific base to have more knowledge about for example, how adapted that mangrove forest needs to be, what kind of species, what is the impact of different species on the erosion control and risk reduction potential, and so on. But this literature is increasingly available, so getting stronger.
Yeah, and with this, I think you answered already the next question that's here in the chat. Could you refer to a scientifically proven positive effect of nature-based solutions? You just said that the evidence is sort of being developed while we speak. There's more papers coming up on that, but it still takes some time. That's how I understood you. From Loy Rego again, there's a follow-up question. How do we advance, sustain, and expand? I believe he refers again to the nature-based solutions, and perhaps we could use this question. I hope that's the meaning, and look a bit at the local context. I mean, you have done a lot of work in Vietnam. You have done this review of papers that I also saw, and you mentioned earlier. What do you see there in terms of? I mean, if we dive a bit deeper into what's happening in terms of implementation, you said structural measures are happening. But what do you see in terms of nature-based solutions and perhaps a better focus on social-ecological issues? Maybe they're nascent, but maybe you can give us a bit of a glimpse.
Yeah, maybe just a few examples about how these specifics really matter. For example, in central Vietnam, where we are talking about where we had this consecutive flood events in October, November. So the rivers are short and steep, so the terrain is rather difficult for nature-based solutions because there's actually not much space. So what is likely important is deforestation upstream, which happened in the past quite a bit, and that has an impact on discharges and how floods develop and how fast floods actually develop. But other measures like retention areas are likely more difficult in these conditions that you have this short river. They are reservoirs built, which are controlled and which are helpful to regulate floods, but those are not ecosystem-based measures. If we go more close to the coast, where there are lagoons and also sand dunes, there's a lot of restoration going on the sand dunes, for example, and I have seen the importance of how that restoration is actually happening if you are using native species to plant on the sand dunes, or if you are using fast-growing species which actually expedite the vegetation cover, but are not necessarily sustainable on the long run. So all those considerations are really locally specific.
Mm-hmm. So basically that means you would have to have like a menu of options available. You would have to have a good knowledge management so people can really see what's worked in other places, and then you have to look at the local context and really get, you know, the situation assessed and then find the match for the local conditions, I believe.
Yes. Many places to look what was there before is quite helpful.
Yes. I would like to turn to a question from Dr. Shubha Dwivedi. What are the effective measures to reduce the melting of glaciers? That's a big one, I believe. Recently, India witnessed, and you showed that also, I think, a huge catastrophe in terms of melting glaciers in Chamoli district of Uttarakhand. So this is what, I guess, the picture you showed of the Glough of the glacial lake outburst flood earlier, that was impressive in a negative sense. What can you really do about that?
Yes, I think to prevent the glaciers melting, that's exactly one of those interconnected risks, because this is happening due to global warming, and global warming cannot be tackled alone locally. So this is something where the entire global community needs to work together to cut emissions and to adhere to the Paris Agreement, at best 1.5 degree goals. If we look locally, what can be done locally, well, we cannot hold glacial melting locally, but we can reduce the risk by reducing exposure and vulnerabilities. So in Uttarakhand, for example, there were two hydropower dams which has been destroyed, and I think it's advisable to look where to build such power dams and how they are at risk from such mass movements event. So I think locally it's mainly about exposure reduction and vulnerability reduction, so that not so many people and not so many critical infrastructure is at harm's way. I hope I answered your question, Shubha.
I think it was pretty comprehensive. I hope also for Dr. Shubha. Let me turn to another sort of like focus in terms of bigger cities along the coast. There is a lot of talk about, I hear a lot about sponge cities, not only for coastal cities, but also for coastal cities, which seems to be also like a very good and innovative, maybe not that innovative more, but a new concept. I read something about Rotterdam as a good example for that, and I read a quote, a key ingredient of Rotterdam's success is attitude, because they have a strong mayor, apparently, that's what I read, and they have a climate change adaptation strategy, and he has a positive perspective on actually rising sea levels, and he believes it can be an opportunity economically and to increase overall resilience. Isn't that a great thinking? Great approach?
Well, I do not know in detail about the mayor of Rotterdam, so to say, but I think it's very helpful if decision makers are cognizant of sea level rise, about not only today's risk, but also tomorrow's emerging risk, and are prepared to plan ahead, because also at the coast, there are so many options we can still take, and how many options we still have really depend on the emission scenario, right? So my second slide, which showed it makes a difference in terms of planning if we are on this or this trajectory, right? But you also saw that until 2050, the difference is not that big. So at the moment, we do have the options on both ends. We do have the opportunity to reduce emissions, and with that, to make a space for the future, for decisions and for solutions. And on the other end, we also need to implement adaptation measures already now, because sea level rise is not gonna go away. Yes. Even if we take the low emission scenario, we will get a certain amount of sea level rise. And what is useful at the CRO is to do adaptive management, to recognize this uncertainty, to recognize these different futures, and to actively plan. And I think this is what Rotterdam is actually doing. And many people then ask, okay, is this just for the wealthy nations? Because of course Rotterdam can afford different solutions. But I always say that the decision opportunity space is there also in developing countries, and the sooner we actually start to recognize that and to work with that space, the larger our hope is that we actually can find a solution. So the window is still there, but we need to be quick, and we need to hurry also in terms of mitigating CO2 emissions. There is I like that question, Bas Stengs, who says, how is the topic of climate change currently received by the young generation in Vietnam? This is the new generation in the end, which will deal with the consequences of climate change. True. What do you think, Zita? Specifically for Vietnam, I don't know. So probably in the audience there are more people who could tell. But from my perspective, I also have kids. And for our family, that really are my children who drive a change on the household level, so to say. So those are the two watchdogs at home who point out if I bought the wrong product, or who question actually our everyday decisions. So I could imagine might be similar in Vietnam, but it's a really good question. So we'll be happy to look at this in the future too. Okay, and if someone wants to add a comment on that, who knows about that, please go ahead and put it in the chat so we can all benefit from your perspective. Maybe towards the end, Zita, you know, you showed all these pictures of this interconnected risk and vulnerabilities, and if we look at it all, it's like, oh dear, we have so much in front of us, and we face so many risks. What makes you hopeful? I mean, what is it that you take from your work, from the people that you meet, from perhaps inspiring people that you meet, that makes you hopeful and motivates you to really carry on doing what you do? Yes, I think what makes me hopeful are the young generations. So listening to my children, it's make such a difference if you have climate change and the related need for action so high on your agenda, but also in terms of international negotiation level. So I'm really hopeful now that the US is back to the Paris Agreement, that the COP26 might get a more positive twist, and the international community is really gearing towards COP26, which is hopefully taking place in November in the UK, to make a big push in terms of cutting emissions and get pledges from countries in. At the moment, what we have in the basket is not sufficient. We need definitely more commitment. All right, Zita. I would like to thank you very much for the work you do, for the things that you showed us, all what you told us about the importance of the different risks and vulnerabilities, and also providing us with some hope that we can all together make a difference. It was really great to have you here, Zita. And I'm looking forward to meeting you again. And with this, I would like to end the session, and now everybody can move to the lobby again and enjoy some music. Thank you very much, Zita, and thank you everyone in the audience for the active discussion and the questions. I see you later. Thank you, Michael.